She's good. All right. Welcome, everybody. Glad that you are here tonight. We were joking that I need to scoot way forward tonight because there's an abnormal gap tonight between where I normally stand, I guess, and where the chairs are. But glad that y'all are here. We are in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 tonight, if you have a Bible or want to turn over there. If you'll remember where we have been so far, we've been several chapters now working through Paul's ideas about freedom and Christian rights. And in particular with the Corinthians, this is an ongoing discussion. They seem to believe that because Christ has freed them from sin and given them the freedom to live as new creation, that they can live however they want. And that's led to all kinds of different problems. And so Paul's trying to address some of those and trying to convince them that while they do have freedom in Christ, their freedom is best expressed in love towards one another and in considering what others have needs of rather than what they have a desire for in their own life. And so that's been Paul's argument that he's been pushing here for several chapters. And we've talked a little bit about idolatry and meat sacrifice to idols. And tonight we're going to dive in a little bit more into what Paul's idea of how to live in Christian freedom looks like, continue that theme. So let's begin reading tonight, 1 Corinthians chapter 10. We'll start right at the very beginning, verse 1. He says, I do not want you to be ignorant of the fact, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors were all under the cloud and that they all passed through the sea. They were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. They all ate the same spiritual food, and they drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock was Christ. Nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them. Their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. Now these things occurred as examples, to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things as they did. So do not be idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry. And we should not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 of them died. We should not test Christ, as some of them did, and were killed by snakes. And do not grumble, as some of them did, and were killed by the destroying angel. These things happened to them as examples, and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the culmination of the ages has come. So, if you think you're standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. We'll pause there for just a minute. We'll come to verse 13 in a few moments here together. Okay, this opening section of this chapter is really interesting when you consider who Paul is writing this letter to. He's writing to a group of predominantly Gentile audience in the church in Corinth, and yet he is writing about events that happened within the history of the people of Israel. And so as you think about this, Paul's writing about these events. He spent some time in Corinth, presumably preaching the gospel to them. And as part of that, he may have gone into some of the history of God's people, may have had time to dive into this. But this chapter is really a deep dive into some of the events from Israel's history. These events that he describes primarily happened in the books of Exodus and Numbers. And the Gentiles were probably a little bit more like us than they were like some of the Jewish men and women who had these stories and these events memorized. Many of them did, and they knew these things backwards and forwards. But the Gentiles are maybe more like us, where you're thinking to yourself, what is he referencing? Which story was that? And yet Paul goes on this deep dive to kind of use these stories as an example to them of times that the people of God, the Israelites, challenged God, or they engaged in idolatry and turned their backs on God. And Paul's saying, here's your example. It's these people that you've never heard of before, stories that you've never known before, and you can look at their story and know that they got it wrong. So don't repeat what they did. So it's kind of an interesting little story here. As I was thinking about this, I was thinking there's a lot in the world that I don't know. I shared with you a couple weeks ago about the rate that information doubles. Does anybody remember where we've gotten to in the last handful of years, it appears that information now doubles every 12 hours in the world. I don't know how you measure that. That's one of the things that I don't know. But apparently there are people who know how to measure this, and they can measure the amount of information that exists in the world, and it doubles every 12 hours now. But there's still a lot of things that all of us don't know, especially when it comes to different groups of people. People who have a different story, people who have a different history, people who have different experiences in life. And so tonight I thought I'd ask you a couple of different questions related to things that probably none of us know. Does anybody know what the purpose of Boxing Day is? Boxing Day. So Boxing Day falls on December 26th every year. Christy, did you have an idea? Do it what? I thought it was just to clean up Christmas. To clean up Christmas? Kind of. It's a Canadian holiday, and it's the day after Christmas, essentially. And maybe we need to learn from the Canadians on this one. I don't know. What you guys tell me what you think. Apparently, it's like second day of Christmas. Like Christmas is not one day; it's 2 days. And so you get 2 days to celebrate Christmas. And they also use it for things like additional shopping. And so like we've kind of adopted this. Like, who does their returns of Christmas presents on December the 26th? Like, I remember doing that as a kid growing up. Like, it was like, okay, the day after Christmas, something's the wrong size, we're returning it, exchanging it, getting the right size. So apparently it's kind of like that. It's a second day of the celebration of Christmas. And the Canadians, I don't know what the significance of calling it boxing. Is there a boxing match that takes place, or does boxing have a different definition that I'm unaware of? Like, boxing stuff up, and I think they take it. I thought they took it and gave it to the poor. Okay, yeah. So there you go. So we're kind of like the Corinthians, learning about Jewish history with Boxing Day. Like, none of us quite know that. Okay, how about another one? Does anybody know the significance of June 17th in Iceland? It's Independence Day. How did you guys not know that? I mean, that's a big one, right? No. So we're kind of like the Corinthians, trying to learn about Jewish history, and we don't know that Independence Day in Iceland is June 17th. Okay, October the 2nd in India is a celebration of a historical figure. Does anybody know which historical figure is celebrated on October the 2nd in India? It's very famous. Like, you could guess and you'd probably get it right. Gandhi, yes, yeah. So October the 2nd is October the 2nd is the day that they celebrate the life of Gandhi. It also happens to be his birthday, which is why they chose that. It's kind of like President's Day for us, right? Is it Washington's birthday that President's Day falls on? Lincoln's birthday. Okay. Does it? Does it move around? It used to be on one of the President's Day. Now it's the third Monday. Okay. Well, see, I'm even learning things about our own culture and history, right? Okay, good. Okay, I'm not supposed to know the answer. No, you're good. You're good. One more for you, and I thought this one would be a fun one for us, especially tonight. How many in the room were born and raised in the great state of Texas? How many were born and raised in a different state? Okay, so just 4. Okay, just 4. So the 4 of you and Jacob have this in common. Did you know that people who are born and raised in the state of Texas take a Texas history class as they grow up? Those who did not grow up in the great state of Texas have never had a Texas history class, which means that Jacob might not know very much about Santa Anna or Davy Crockett. So tonight's challenge is, when we're done, go find Jacob and ask him to tell you the story. Like, Jacob, you need to tell me the story about Santa Anna. Or tell me the story about the Alamo, and just challenge him and see if he knows very much about Texas history. And I won't put anybody... Louisiana history? Yeah. So there you go. So even within different regions, we have different stories that we tell and that we celebrate. So we're kind of like the Corinthians with our knowledge or lack of knowledge of other cultures and other religions and societies. And so the Corinthians are getting this deep dive into some of these stories from Jewish history, from the people of God, the Israelites, that they don't know. And yet Paul's using these stories as an example to say, God's people have already done this. They've tried these different things. They've lived how they want to live. They've chosen other gods and followed other gods. And the result of all of this is death. I mean, that's essentially the end of the story, time after time after time. Seems to be this. So Paul uses events from Israel's history from the books of Exodus and Numbers, and so he talks about the crossing of the Reed Sea. He talks about manna and quail raining from heaven. He talks about Moses striking the rock and water rushing forth. It's one of my favorite references in the book of 1 Corinthians, because did you notice that Paul says that the rock accompanies the people of Israel? Like, you've got this trail of Israelites, and behind the trail you've got this rock just like following along in their wake, just going with them everywhere they go, so that everywhere they go, Moses can strike the rock and the water can come forth. You've got a story about Korah's rebellion that's referenced. That's in back Numbers chapter 16. Korah rises up in rebellion against Moses and his leadership. I think it's 250 people that rise up against Moses with him, and they're struck dead. You have the very interesting story of the venomous snakes attacking the camp of the Israelites in Numbers chapter 21. And it's like one of the most bizarre stories in the Old Testament. The solution that God gives to Moses for these venomous snakes is that Moses is supposed to fashion a bronze serpent and put it up on a pole, and anybody who looks upon this bronze serpent up on the pole will be cured of the venom within them. It's just like super bizarre. Like, it sounds like they're making an idol to these snakes is what it sounds like, right? And of course, this gets referenced to Jesus being the one who's raised up, and when you look upon him, your salvation is, and so very fascinating story. But that comes out of Numbers chapter 21. There's this plague that happens in Numbers 25, and I spent too much time on this, you guys, because in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul says that in one day, 23,000 Israelites died in verse 8. And the story in Numbers 25 says that 24,000 people died. And so what's the discrepancy? And guys, I spent like over an hour on this one little detail about what's the discrepancy between 24,000 and 23,000. By the way, before I even go into any of this, who in here is interested or cares at all about a discrepancy between 1,000 people? Okay, there's a few. Okay, because I kind of was like, I'm going to spend all this time and no one's even going to care. Like, no one's even going to have an interest in the world about why there's a discrepancy between these two things. So the first thing to keep in mind and to remember is that Paul does not likely have the book of Numbers available to him in Corinth while he's writing. Well, he's not in Corinth, but while he's writing to the Corinthians, he doesn't have the book of Numbers to just go back and reference. So give Paul a little bit of grace, because if he just happened to get the number wrong, which I don't think necessarily is the case, but if he just happened to get it wrong, like, we can give Paul a little bit of grace for a discrepancy of 1,000 people. But some of the explanations that people have theorized or talked about is that there is not much specific written about the manner in which these people died in the book of Numbers chapter 25. And so one possible explanation is that you have a situation in which, if you go back to Numbers 25, there's kind of two different events that take place. You have people who are lifted up and killed, hung, as a result of their sinfulness, the leaders of what's going on in this. And so that could number 1,000. And then you have 23,000 people who die from the plague. And Numbers 25 is just not all that specific. And so perhaps Paul actually has more information about what took place in Numbers because of the ability that they had to tell stories from their history and culture and to remember those details. So even though we have the written record that Paul didn't have, Paul might have more information because of the ability that those people had to tell stories from generation to generation of what took place back in Numbers 25. So it was very fascinating. If you ever do want to do a deep dive on that, all you have to do is Google, and you'll get like all kinds of crazy stuff that shows up about Numbers 25 and the discrepancy between 1 Corinthians 10. Okay, so anyways, Paul gives all of these stories. The crossing of the Reed Sea, manna and quail from heaven, Moses striking the rock, Korah's rebellion, venomous snakes and the bronze serpent, plague in Numbers 25, and 23,000 people dying in one day. And all of this is meant to make one singular point, which I think he does in verse 12. Basically, he says, set your hearts not on things that are evil, but on things that will help you to stand firm in faith. The Israelites, over and over again, they complain against God. Man, life was easier back in Egypt. Why did God bring us out here into the wilderness to die? And they're focusing, they're setting their hearts on things that are going to make them fall. And Paul's whole point is set your heart not on things of evil, not on things that will be about complaining against God or grumbling against God, but things that will help you stand firm in your faith. How many of you have ever had the experience where you begin to complain about something and all of a sudden you find yourself hours later, maybe days later, maybe months or years later, and you have become someone who is a complainer? Like it was just one parking spot, but I couldn't let go of it. Can you believe that they did that? And all of a sudden, your whole identity becomes a person who is prone to complaining about things, prone to grumbling, prone to blaming God or other people for things that are going on in your life. And Paul says, if you focus on those things, you'll become like that. So focus on the things that help you to stand firm in faith rather than on things that cause you to think of evil or to complain or those kinds of things. Okay, and then Paul goes into verse 13, a really fascinating verse that I thought probably deserved quite a bit of conversation tonight. So verse 13, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. Okay. Anybody familiar with this verse? Anybody read this verse, at least on occasion? I figured this would probably be a fairly familiar verse to us. Really interesting verse. God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you're tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. My Bible, I hope your Bible does as well, includes a footnote into this particular word, tempted. And the footnote in my Bible simply says that it can also mean testing or to be tested as well. And there's a difference between those two things, at least in our mind, isn't there, between being tempted and being tested? One of them seems to be a very negative connotation that's associated with evil. To be tempted of something is to be drawn towards that which we should not be a part of. To be tempted towards sin, towards negative behavior, towards bad things. But to be tested has a different connotation, I think, which is to say that God is perhaps attempting to purify our faith. That's the kind of language that James might use, that things that are tested, particularly a metal that is tested, is purified during its testing. It undergoes something for a particular purpose, not to draw it towards evil, but to purify it, to lead it towards something that is good. The word that Paul uses here is a Greek word, pyrasmos. Pyrasmos. I think that's how you would pronounce that. And it basically just means to put an attempt towards, to try it, to test it. And so, speaking of James, I thought we would read a little bit of James because he also uses this kind of language. Mark, if you'll hit those next couple of slides. James chapter 1, right at the very beginning of what James writes. Do I have one for verses 2 and 3? Nope. See, this is why you always mark your Bible and you always have something ready to go. All right, let me flip over to James chapter 1. Sorry, y'all. Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd Peter. Y'all know the song, right? All right. James chapter 1, starting in verse 2, he says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And then jumping down into verse 12 through 18, he continues and said, blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they're dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's full grown, gives birth to death. Don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all that he created. So James, I think, draws a distinction between tempting and testing, and tries to give us some idea of what a difference it can make when we think of tempting, which comes from our own sinful human nature, and testing, which might be a different category that helps to produce perseverance within us about our faith. And so a couple of examples that you might think through in scripture of this. The first one that jumped into my brain was the story of Abraham with Isaac, when God comes to Abraham and says that he must sacrifice Isaac, right? He's gotten this promise from God all the way back in the book of Genesis chapter 12 that he's going to have a child, that he's going to be a father of many nations. And finally, in his old age, it happens, and Isaac is born, and now all of a sudden in Genesis 22, God comes back and tells Abraham, you're going to have to sacrifice your son. And God's desire is not that Isaac would die, not that Isaac would lose his life, but it's this testing moment where God is testing the faith of Abraham to determine, do you love me, or do you just love the results of knowing me? The results of knowing God is that he gets a son in his old age that he'd been yearning for decades, but does he really love God? And the testing produces the result that Abraham is shown to be one who does have great faith. Another example, of course, is Jesus in the wilderness. We get this in multiple of the gospel accounts, Matthew 4, Mark 1, Luke 4, when Jesus himself is taken into the wilderness and he fasts for 40 days and nights, and then Satan comes to him to tempt him. And he begins to offer these potential temptations to Jesus, that Jesus quotes scripture and rebukes him so that he won't do what Satan wants, but will continue to do the will of his Father. So we have examples of tempting, we have examples of testing, and Paul throws this verse into 1 Corinthians chapter 10, that is really informative, I think, to us, really helpful to us. So we know that we have experiences where we're going to have temptation in our life. James helps us out. These don't come from God. They come from our sinful nature. But we also know that there are going to be instances in our life when we go through a testing. And these can come from God to try to bring a result of drawing us deeper into our faith and purifying our faith for us. But Paul tells us that in these situations that God will provide us a way out. So I'm curious to hear some comments tonight from you guys, what your thoughts are about this idea of a way out. When Paul writes that God will provide this way out to us in these moments of tempting or these moments of testing, how do we react to that? How do we receive that? How do we hear that? What's our life experience about that? Any comments or ideas or thoughts about this way out that Paul talks about?
Before you answer that, I'm perplexed because he just gave examples of tens of thousands of people who were tested beyond what they could bear or hold up to, and were just taken by the angels or made dust in the desert or eaten by the snakes or whatever. And so it's like, because these people wouldn't have known that.
Yeah.
So they're just like, hey, just by the way, here's some things God did to some people that didn't follow him. But hey, just know that he's not going to lay anything on you that you can't bear.
Right, yeah.
That seems like
he's speaking out of both sides of his mouth, maybe, right? Like the examples I give you aren't very encouraging examples because
it's kind of interesting to me too, because he's kind of like implying, hey, just keep in mind, this is what God does on a regular basis. And this is post the death of Christ and resurrection, kind of new covenant. But yet he's like little threats right here. Just be careful, because like you just don't want to be one of these that we just decide to slaughter.
Yeah. Well, and look back. Let's see if I can find it really quickly too. Look back, verse 9. We should not test Christ as some of them did. What an interesting verse there when you're talking about events thousands of years before the life of Jesus, right? These events, Exodus and Numbers that Paul's recounting, they have no idea about the person of Jesus.
That it was even portrayed as, God was providing water and manna as they, desert, and I don't really remember it being implied that you're not being appreciative of what Christ is doing out here in the desert, or I'm gonna kill you.
Right, right. Yeah. So I do think it's
hard to understand.
Yeah, yeah.
That day listening to this.
Yeah. And especially like we said, from the perspective of this is not their story. This is a different people's story, right? Like this is us hearing the story of people from South Africa and being like, okay, I've got to connect their history with what I'm experiencing. And
we don't tell new Christians that today.
Right.
We don't go, hey, by the way, there's a good chance the snakes are gonna eat you.
Yeah, yeah. So well, okay. Before I'll throw something out there. Anybody else want to add on to that or comment on that?
Well, I look at it that first of all, it's a refining process. So you have to first of all accept that you are sinful in nature. You are not God. God is perfect. You are not. And even in our best efforts, we fall short, right? We sin. These people sin. Some of them, I mean, it's a choice, whether it's out of ignorance, not educating yourself, not understanding what God really desires of you and from you. But when I think of, He'll always provide a way. To me, of course, these are grand examples, but I think of the parting of the Red Sea. They came up and there was absolutely nowhere to go. And I also think about and sorry, I can't think of the book, but when Jesus returns, he's going to split the Mount of Olives in two, and that's going to create a valley. And the third of his people who listen are going to escape through that valley that just suddenly appears. Where is that?
I'm thinking Revelation. So you've got the shirt on. Or you're thinking one of the Old Testament prophets. Okay, yeah.
But anyway, so for me, those are kind of grand examples. Of course, he does that on a daily basis in a much smaller, intimate, personal way. That I think most of the time our lives are so busy and we're not focusing on that we don't even realize.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
You just got protected out of his mercy, but now you're doing something here, and he's going, sin still has consequences.
Yeah. So I think when we look at the story of God's people in the Old Testament, the story of Israel, we see a pattern play out. It can have different details in it, but it's essentially like the people act very cyclically in the Old Testament. And so in my mind, I'm thinking of Moses is on Mount Sinai. It's Exodus 32, and he's having this experience of God that is unlike anything that has ever happened in the history of the world. Like he's getting to be in the presence of God. There's smoke and like it's just like this crazy scene. And while this is going on, the people are down at the base of the mountain putting together a golden calf idol to worship. And they're afraid, well, Moses ain't coming back from that. Like that looks pretty mortifying, terrifying. And let's just go on and we'll just continue on to worship this golden calf. And this is the experience of Israel, is the Almighty is very visibly in their presence. And something within them draws them away from him. Towards worship of idols, towards following their own path. And these stories, I think that Paul includes, are examples of that in many ways, because the first thing that happens at the sign of trouble when they're at the Red Sea and the Egyptians coming is, we're going to die, as if they don't have a God who's powerful and who is leading them out. And then after God is powerful and leads them out, they get to the wilderness and, well, there's no food, there's no water. Thanks, God, for bringing us to the desert so that we could just die of starvation and thirst. As if God didn't just part the Reed Sea, to let them walk through. And this is over and over again. So I think sometimes we are very blind to the presence and power of God. And part of what Paul writes about when he says that God provides you a way out, part of that has to be our awareness of, I'm in a situation in life right now where I can't even see God at work. When the venomous snakes come, God does provide a way out. I mean, it's a very bizarre to us. It's a very bizarre way out, right? Like there's this bronze serpent, and if you lay eyes on that bronze serpent, you'll be healed. It's like, okay, that's a strange one, God. But then he comes back later, and he's like, it's just like Jesus when Jesus is lifted up on the cross. It's the same thing as when Moses lifted up that bronze serpent in the wilderness, and so sometimes the way out is something that we need to open our eyes to. Sometimes the way out is something that we might not be very happy with. If you were to tell me the way out of getting bitten by a venomous snake is to lay eyes on a bronze serpent, I don't, God, I think I'd rather just avoid that one entirely. I think I'm good. Like, can we skip part A and part B and just not even do this one at all? You think about Korah's rebellion, and
That's one to be talking about snake story here.
that's right. Yeah. If you don't know, I am mortified. In fact, we were talking earlier today. Hang on. Should I tell this story?
I've got one.
It's the same one you're thinking of. Okay. Occasionally, things happen. You guys, it's okay. It's going to be okay, everybody. Things happen, okay? So Jacob calls up to the office one day. Rick is still preaching for us, and so I'm brand new here. I mean, it's got to be less than months, like 2 months in. And Jacob calls up to the office.
I
and
nearly just told you just pack up and go home.
Yeah. Jacob calls up to the office and says, there's a snake in the auditorium and I've lost it. I need y'all to come down and help me find it. I jumped to the absolute worst case. Like, this thing is an anaconda, you guys. Like, this thing is feet long. Like, it's ready to strike. And so we come down, and I am climbing on the pews. Like I am like, all right, guys, you guys see it? Where's it at? And
You got up on the stage.
Yeah. So it turns out it's like this little, like 8-inch long, like not even as big as an earthworm. Like it's this tiny little thing. Yeah. Thank you, David. Yeah. And it's that moment where my mind filled in the gap, right? Like my mind, there's a snake loose in the auditorium, right? And it's the worst possible outcome for me. And in fact, it's not even really something that's significant. And so
I got you sidetracked there, didn't
yeah, a little bit. So I've got to figure out how to tie this back in now, right? But I think this is we are incapable sometimes of seeing the ways that we fail to trust God, the ways that we don't even acknowledge Him. And part of, I think, this testing that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 10 is, if your faith is to deepen, you've got to be open to opening your eyes. You've got to be willing to allow God to take you to a place that you might not choose on your own. But if you will trust God through it, it can lead you into deeper relationship and joy and satisfaction with Him. And that doesn't mean that everything's going to turn out peachy keen, right? Like, you might go through some stuff. And yet, if you can rely on God, if you can find it within you, within your faith, to throw yourself at His feet, He will provide you a way to reach Him, to come to Him. Okay, that was a lot of kind of preaching at you about this way out. What do you guys think about the way out?
I'm wondering, and I've never noticed this before, but this is just a bad place for a chapter break, it looks like to me. Because beginning in chapter 9 and verse 24, Paul starts talking about the need for us to be self-disciplined. He talks about entering a race, and how it's the ones who finish the race who win the prize. So I punish my body in order to prepare myself to complete this race. And then he says, now let me give you some examples from Old Testament history where they didn't complete the race.
Yeah.
They weren't disciplining themselves.
Yeah.
It seems like to me that's maybe more what he's wanting to do with this.
Yeah. And that's a really good practice too. I would highly encourage that. We did this maybe a year ago or so. I challenged us. We were gonna cover each gospel in one sitting. Like, it's an impossible task. You can't do that, right? But the challenge or the idea is, don't allow the headings and the chapter breaks to determine how you read the story. If you can find it in yourself to read 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 1 all the way through the end of the letter, it's a different experience than reading it section by section and using the chapter breaks or the section breaks to do it. I'm going to do a devotional on just this one section, right? And so you do get a different experience when you read some of these chapters that we. Mhm. Yeah. 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 So that's a practice I highly recommend to everybody is if you're very much in the habit of reading it one section at a time, hey, one time, dedicate yourself some time and read it from start to finish. Even the Gospels, which are very long, it takes, probably take you a whole afternoon or more to do that with an entire Gospel, but really, really valuable exercise.
I was gonna say too, one thing that caught my eye is no temptation that sees you beyond what people normally experience, and if there's one thing that I found is true, when I'm tempted, I don't think my temptation is as easy as everybody else's. Because I can tell other people have faced their temptation. But he's saying, and I know there's been people who, where my worst temptation, there are people who've been through worse, and there are people who've been, but he's saying, regardless of how bad it is, there is a way out. There is you can have a seat. Yeah, like I said, it may not be what you want it to be. It may not. It may involve some pain and stuff that you don't want to go through. But he is saying God will be with you, and you can get through it. And there's always a choice. It may not always be a choice.
Yeah, yeah. We prefer. Yeah.
It's actually comforting knowing God knows me. Individually, God knows each one of us. And he's saying, Craig, I'm there for you. You can do it. And in essence, it's comforting. And I've always read this, kind of like, you're being tempted, you just need to be strong. God's not going to let you do it. But it's really, no, God's there in your corner, and he knows me intimately. And he said, this stuff's going to happen to you, but hey, I'm faithful. I'm with you.
Yeah.
You can do this.
Yeah. Well, and part of
I'm sorry.
no, it's great. Part of what's so beautiful about the life of Jesus, I don't know that we give enough credit to Jesus that he became a human being. He's fully God, but he's also fully human. He's faced the temptations that we face. He's been through those moments. He's been through grief. He's been through like he's had to live just like we have. And he's been through those things, and he still is with us. That's part of his promise, is that his spirit indwells each of us and that he's with us. And so even though the things that we face in life are things that probably most of the time we would never choose for ourselves, Christ is right there with us. He doesn't abandon us. He doesn't leave us by himself. I was thinking, I know this is true from my life, that I would much rather be exempted from those stories, from those events, from those things that happen to me that hurt. I'd choose exemption 100% of the time. But it's usually those same stories that I can look back on, and sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it takes a while to look back on those things and say, that was the time that I grew the most, because I had to. I couldn't do it by myself. I had to rely on God. I had to rely on my church family. I had to rely on my family members. I needed something beyond myself. And I think that's what Paul's pointing to here a little bit, that y'all are picking up on, is if you will allow him, he will be there for you. But you've got to allow him to do that for you. He won't just step in and take over for you. And Galatians 5:22, we've changed it to sound really nice. But the fruit of the Spirit is love and joy and peace. And what's the old word that we used to use there? Forbearance, long suffering. Patience sounds a lot nicer than long suffering does. But that endurance that our faith in these moments of testing, that endurance that can come from that is really significant, and it takes you to a deeper level of trust in God. So I don't think we should ever overlook that. Remember, too, Paul had this pesky thorn in the flesh. He writes about that in the second letter to the Corinthians. We don't get to know what it is. We don't know how insignificant or deeply significant it was, if it was a physical condition, an injury, whatever it is. He's got that thorn in the flesh. It's not like Paul had a perfect life. He goes in that same chapter in 2 Corinthians, he goes through the list of things that he had to go through, beatings and shipwrecks and receiving the 39 lashes. And he has these experiences in life that he has to rely on God. So, don't forget that not only did Jesus live as a human being, but Paul went through some stuff. And when he writes this thing about temptings and testings, like, he's been through some stuff. And so even in those situations, he's saying, rely on God. Throw yourself upon the mercy of Jesus.
I guess when we were first started talking about this, the thing that came to my mind was this whole concept of free will, and I love to beat up on the Israelites because they were weak and immoral, and they just didn't rely on God like I did. But what I see in the Israelites, and I see in these tests and these trials, these temptations that they went through, God gave them a way out. He gave them free will. He didn't force them to make those decisions. He didn't force them to do the things that they did. He gave them the free will to do those things. So your way out is your free will. Now, that free will is driven by your own selfish desires. We see all those examples what the Israelites did in the desert and all those years of wandering. If your free will, though, is to allow your will to be driven by the Spirit, then you have way out. That's your way out. Their way out was a free will to not complain. They were perfectly free to not complain about what God was not providing. They were perfectly free to not question God or not test God through imperfect things that they said all the time. So I guess the blessing and curse that God gave us is our free will, and how we choose to apply that determines the path that we're going to end up.
Yeah.
One way or the other. And thanks be to God that He has the mercy to intervene when our free will takes us down a wrong path.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of the cross, right? Is not only did the Israelites choose over and over and over again, and how do they keep missing it? And the disciples and the Corinthian Christians, how can you think that's okay? And we do this. We justify our behavior, and we just don't have a letter. Let's just hope that none of us ever have a letter written about our behavior that's read aloud in church, right? But the beauty of the cross is that even in those moments, man, He has provided us the ultimate way out, and we're nowhere without the cross. We're in the grave. Okay, I take that back. We're in one place. We're in the grave. That's where we are without the cross. And so, yeah, I think this is one of those verses that it's deeply challenging because everybody has the experience that you say, okay, but what about this, right? Or I have a friend, or I've gone through this, and every one of us has that. And so it's a deeply challenging verse. It's really hard to grasp the complexity and the depth of what Paul's writing about here. But I think he's onto something. And I think it's worth us not disregarding, as Paul was just naive. Paul didn't know what I've been through. He didn't know what my family's had to experience. He didn't know about what our church has gone through. In those moments of testing and tempting and trial, he's saying, come to Jesus. That's the only place that you can come that will provide you with any kind of semblance of peace. Because if you try to find it on your own, I think you'll find that your own strength will give out at some point. Okay, any final comments? We only made it halfway through the chapter. So the good news about this discussion is you have to remember every piece of it, because we're picking up right in the middle next week. And so, like, pretend like all of this is going on in the same class next Wednesday night, right? But any final questions, comments, insights, anything at all? Okay. Well, next week we'll pick up and we'll finish chapter 10 and the first verse of chapter 11. We'll follow the I like to call them arbitrary chapter breaks and section breaks and things like that. So we'll read through chapter 11 verse 1 next Wednesday night, and I really appreciate all the comments and interaction tonight. And encourage you to really chew on this one. And if you come up with something great, bring it back next week. Make a note, write it down, and would love to continue the conversation. Russ is going to pray for us tonight to close us. So go ahead, Russ.